Competing with large companies. Competing with large companies is a special challenge for startup companies. Why? Because large companies have some very powerful advantages over startup companies. They are further down the learning curve. They have great reputations if they're number one in their market. They have strong cash flows. They benefit from economies of scale and complementary assets. So if you are a startup company looking at how to challenge existing companies, what should you do? I think this is a situation where you, as a startup company, can take some lessons from martial arts or military strategy, where you're a smaller and weaker opponent or smaller and weaker force trying to battle a much stronger opponent or much more powerful opponent. So what should you do? You don't want to attack strength. So if you're a small fighter against a much bigger fighter, you don't want to challenge the other fighter on the basis of a test of strength. So we need to look for weakness and attack weakness. And usually strengths are accompanied by weaknesses, or another way to think about it is every strength also creates potential weakness. In the case of a large successful company, the most common area of weakness is in the company's ability to innovate. Why? If I am a large successful company, and let's say I'm number one in my product category, my market already, therefore I am the main beneficiary of the market exactly as it's structured today. This is the market that has made me number one, and I have the most invested in this market staying exactly the way that it is. I need to satisfy existing customers, partner, and supply chain. My entire organizational structure is built around current tasks. And therefore, I am least motivated to innovate, and especially I am least motivated to disruptively innovate this market. Why would I want to disrupt a market where I am already the market leader? What I want to do is hopefully avoid or block disruption, but that's the opposite of innovation. So because I am in a situation, market leader is in a situation where it's difficult for them to innovate, as a successful startup challenging market leaders, we want to focus on disruptive innovation. What do those opportunities look like? What do opportunities that favor new companies or startup companies look like? I like to describe these as situations where existing firms are frozen in the headlights of oncoming disruptive technologies and business models. And we see this happening, around us today. You can look at the taxi industry, which is essentially frozen in the headlights of ride sharing. The ride sharing model is highly disruptive to the existing taxi model, and you can see how ride sharing is essentially crushing the existing market leaders in the taxi business because they're unable to respond to the disruptive competitive threat created by ride-sharing companies. We can see something similar in the hotel or accommodation business, where the Airbnb model is also threatening to disrupt traditional accommodation business model. I like to think about an example from quite a few years ago, which illustrates this situation very nicely. Dell Computer. If we think about Dell Computer's ability to disrupt the existing personal computer business. This was a company founded by Michael Dell when he was still a teenager, starting with very small investment and without really disruptive technology, but with a disruptive business model. And Dell's disruptive business model was selling mass customized computers direct to end users, which seems not that radical today, but back then was a highly disruptive business model. Who was the market leader back then? IBM. We talked about IBM before. They were the very early mover in personal computers who were able to capture a lot of the value during the exponential growth phase, but then basically they were crushed by Dell. So IBM, the leading personal computer company in the world, when Dell launched, and a few years ago, IBM exited the personal computer business because no longer able to compete. And one of the key reasons for that was the entry of Dell and their disruptive business model into the PC business. So what was so disruptive about Dell's innovative business model, and what made it so successful in beating IBM? The IBM business model was based on what? Based on their sales force. So they had a world-renowned sales force who were very effective at selling large orders of standardized computers to organizations, large companies. And this was the core of their personal computer business. So Dell did not initially attack IBM in that segment. What they did was with the innovative business model, they targeted a segment that we would call bad customers for IBM. Who were those bad customers? They were individuals who wanted not to buy large orders of standardized computers, but who wanted to buy highly customized highly or to some degree customized computers at a low price. And this is a segment that IBM was not eager to serve at all. Because why? Because these customers are much less profitable for IBM than their existing customers. They don't have a lot of money to spend, and they require a lot of hand-holding and personal attention. So Dell focused on those customers first, and after they established a very strong beachhead in that market, they moved to small, medium enterprise market, and then later were able to challenge IBM successfully in their core market of large customers. And if you go back and look at what was Dell's innovative product, it was a mail order catalog. So basically print a catalog and send it out to people and let them choose different variations of their computer, either in the catalog or on the phone. So this doesn't seem like a very difficult model for IBM to copy. Why couldn't IBM create their own catalog? And of course they could. They could easily create their own catalog. Why didn't they do it? They didn't do it because they didn't want to compete with their own sales force. They didn't want to try to sell direct to customers and compete with their distributors and the retailers. So because they were so dependent on their value chain, they found it very difficult to respond to this competitive threat. And by the time they decided they did need to respond to this competitive threat, now Dell had already grown up from being just an upstart, disruptive startup to being a very powerful competitor with a cost advantage, and IBM already basically had lost the battle. So that's a great example of small company targeting the weakness of large company with innovative business model, and we have seen this repeated over and over by successful, disruptive, innovative startups.